Hey everyone, welcome back to the Holistic Navigator podcast, where we talk about all things holistic health and believe in the body's ability to heal itself, if given the proper nutrients and care. For those of you who may happen to be new to the show, let me say welcome and thank you so much for listening today. My name's Brian Strickland, I'm the producer, and I'm joined in the studio today by our host Ed Jones. And our goal is to simply educate anyone who may be interested in learning more about natural holistic healing. We're excited today to speak with Dr. David Brownstein, a board-certified family physician and one of the foremost practitioners of holistic medicine in the country. We're talking about a handful of topics today, ranging from thyroid function to blood pressure. And with that being said, that's it for me, so let's go ahead and start the show, and let me hand it over to our host, Mr. Ed Jones.
Thank you very much, Brian. Yes, I am so excited to have one of my most popular people that I have followed for probably 12 to 15 years. And his name is Dr. David Brownstein. And I want to welcome you, Dr. Brownstein, to the Holistic Navigator.
Well, thank you for having me.
I've been doing this career of holistic nutrition for going on 41 years in January, so that will be very soon, of course. And I have been a follower of so many people that I respect and who are really brave soldiers in this path of holistic nutrition health, especially those who are able to see through the fog and not be captured by the pharmaceutical influences. And I know some of your history, Dr. Brownstein, is you are a board-certified family physician, one of the foremost practitioners of holistic medicine in this country, and a medical director of holistic medicine in West Bloomfield. You have lectured internationally. I actually met you about probably 8 years ago in Nashville, Tennessee, at a medical conference. I was up there with a friend of mine, Dr. Charles Adams, and spent 2 or 3 days there and really enjoyed talking to you at that time. I know you have practiced holistic medicine for probably about 2 decades, and you do specialize in the use of vitamins, minerals, herbs, natural hormones, but you also embrace so many other things like kinesiology, acupuncture, nutritional therapies in your practice. And you've written many books. You've written 10 that I've read every single one of, and I also get your newsletter. So quite aware of your philosophy and your teachings. And so, I'm a person who certainly talks the talk and have for 4 decades. And I'd like to get your, of course, information, your opinion on about 3 topics, one of which is on iodine. I am been so enamored about the power of iodine and the fact that I think, and you clarified this, most physicians in the 1930s actually carried iodine with them in their doctor's bag because it has such a wide range of applications for sick patients. So let's talk about that, because your book on iodine, which is, of course, labeled Why You Need It and Why You Can't Live Without It, is phenomenal. We actually sell it and recommend it highly. So tell the listeners about why we need to have this in our toolbox of remedies and perhaps also for prevention of health declines.
Well, iodine's an essential item we can't live without. And either we get it from our food or we supplement, or problems develop and eventually we'll die without it. But the history of iodine goes back, hundreds of years, and the iodine you're referring to that, I recommend for most people is Lugol's solution. In the 1800s, after Dr. Lugol, in the early 1800s, after Dr. Lugol developed Lugol's solution, which is 5% iodine and iodide in a potassium solution. It was widely used in medicine for almost any condition. And the number one thing that was killing people back then was infections. And iodine is known to have strong anti-infective properties. No bacteria, parasite, yeast, virus has been shown to be resistant to iodine. So doctors liberally prescribed it till the early 20th century. And once patent medicine took hold after World War II, iodine kind of fell out of favor because It wasn't a patentable substance. It was very cheap, and doctors became, enamored with pharmaceuticals. And iodine salt came into play, which we'll talk about soon. But, after that, iodine wasn't really recommended by doctors, and it fell into decline. And what's happened over the years is our iodine levels have actually fallen over the last 50 years. And we've become more iodine deficient, and that set up a whole host of problems.
Wow. And yes, and I personally, always take some iodine. I also keep it in reserve in case I was not feeling well. But I know there's a lot of confusion about dosing of iodine. I know that there are people who think that there's enough in the junkie salt that we have, and that's of course not true. But then the dosing of the nutritional supplements does range from about 1.5 milligrams up to probably about 60, and you certainly can clarify that. One of my concerns, and and you help me with this, is I know that if there's a few select clients, patients, that if they do too much iodine, is there a risk of creating hyperthyroidism, which of course is an active thyroid, which then can cause another host of problems? Is that a real issue with the higher dosings?
Well, sure, it's an issue, but luckily not a very common issue. And over 19 years of using iodine in my practice, I can count 3 or 4 patients that I thought developed a problem or developed hyperthyroidism due to iodine. So iodine is only contraindicated in individuals with an autonomously functioning nodule in their thyroid gland. What that means is a piece of the thyroid has sort of developed on its own and it's lost the body's controls. And so when you give iodine, it'll start making a lot of thyroid hormone. And that's the case because these people feel it with the first or second dose of iodine. They get nervous, jittery, palpitations, and they don't like it. The only way to tell that is to as a physician, to be good with your hands and palpate the thyroid and see if there's any nodules. And number 2, if you feel any nodules, you get an uptake scan of the thyroid, and you're looking for a hot nodule, one that takes up a lot of iodine. Like I said, I've had 3 cases in 19 years. My partners have had a couple of cases. It's not very common when we have 99+% of our patients taking iodine.
And what is the range that you generally are prescribing iodine for the general patient, not one specific with problems? What range are you recommending?
Well, the RDA for iodine, which was established in the 1920s, is 150 micrograms per day, and a little bit more in pregnancy and lactation. But when the RDA was established, we were having a goiter epidemic across the Midwestern United States. In fact, it was across the whole entire United States, but worst in the Midwest, where I am. Mm-hmm. And that includes the Great Lakes area, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio. And then if you just draw lines straight down the country, it's all the central United States. So the U.S. government was worried about this goiter epidemic because goiter was occurring in animals as well. And the animals weren't growing to the right size. And the animals were suffering from thyroid problems in those areas because there wasn't enough iodine in the soil and the food. So there was a worry that as the human population expanded in the early 20th century, that we would outstrip our ability to feed them. So this went up to the highest levels of government, and studies were done in Michigan and Ohio to look at what's the minimum amount of iodine we can give to animals to give them normal thyroid function and prevent goiter. And what they found was when the minimal amount was about 150 micrograms, for a human size. And so that's how iodine salt became available. And that's what the amount they put in to supply about 150 micrograms per day. And at that time, it was a pretty good therapy. It was really one of first public health events that were very positive for mankind. And, the goiter epidemic went down and the animals, stopped having thyroid problems and their goiter problems. And they started procreating and growing to the right size. And it was a successful public health campaign. The problem over the years has been that people are using less iodized salt now. In fact, there's studies that show there's estimates that somewhere between at least 50% and 80% of households don't use any iodized salt. And number two, our exposure to toxic chemicals like bromine and fluoride have gone up over the years, and these things cause you to lose iodine in your body. So actually, over the years, our iodine requirements have gone up compared to our predecessors, our grandparents and great-grandparents and so on. So we have a higher iodine requirement now than they did because our exposure to all these toxic elements are much higher. Mm-hmm. And we're not getting it in, so we're suffering from iodine deficiency problems. So the quick answer to your question is, for an average person, how much iodine do they need in today's toxic world? My experience has been about 25 milligrams for most people. And that's a combination of iodine and iodide as found in Lugol solution. If you have diseases of the endocrine tissue where iodine concentrates, which includes the breast, ovaries, uterus, prostate, pancreas, and thyroid, generally you'll need a little bit more than that.
Wow, that's wonderful information. Let me ask you your advice, because I've been advising clients for many years that have concerns about the potential of this high dose turning it into a hyper. What I kind of tell them is, I want you to take your true resting pulse rate at least twice before you start this. And if you start feeling funny, do it again. And if your pulse has gone up 10 to 12 beats a minute for no other apparent reason, you might consider playing with the dose and getting off of it and seeing if it, goes back to normal. Is that good advice?
I think that's reasonable advice. And the other thing you can tell them is, look, people know when they're hyperthyroid, they get nervous, jittery, and palpitations. Mm-hmm. If you feel nervous, jittery, and palpitations, generally they're going to feel with the first or second dose of iodine. Then, checking the pulse rates and, all that stuff can really help to see. It's really rare. I don't see it happen very often.
Well, I think it's overblown with the concern, but that's what a lot of people are asking. And I never knew that animals were having the problems with the low iodine. That's so interesting. And before we move on to the next subject, so what are the common symptoms for your patients who do have iodine insufficiencies? What is common?
According to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which the U.S. government does every 8 to 10 years, iodine levels across the United States have fallen over 50% and nearly 60% over the last 40 to 50 years. So the vast majority of Americans are suffering from iodine deficiency. And I can tell you the majority of those are severely iodine deficient in testing thousands of patients over the years between me and my partners. So one of iodine's main jobs in the body is to maintain the normal architecture of the glandular tissue. That includes, as I said before, the thyroid, ovaries, uterus, breast, prostate, pancreas, and thyroid, if I didn't mention it. And iodine's job in those tissues, one of its jobs is to maintain the normal architecture of the glands. So in iodine deficiency, the first thing that starts to happen in the glandular tissue is you get cysts. And if the iodine deficiency goes on longer, the cysts become hard and nodular. If it goes on longer, they take a hyperplastic appearance, which is a microscopic appearance that is a precursor to cancer in those tissues, which is the end stage of iodine deficiency. And that correlates exactly with what we're seeing in our country right now. We have 1 in 7 women with breast cancer, 1 in 3 men with prostate cancer. We have epidemic increases of pancreatic, ovarian, and uterine cancer. Thyroid cancer is the fastest growing cancer. I say all these conditions are related to iodine deficiency. One of the symptoms that you asked about can be cysts in the glandular tissue. Fibrocystic breast affects over 80% of U.S. women right now. Women are suffering from cysts in their ovaries. There's cysts and nodules in the thyroid occurring at epidemic rates. Pancreatic cysts occur, and prostate problems. 1 in 3 men have prostate cancer. Again, I relate all this to iodine deficiency.
Wow, that is a alarming, of course, and I'm aware of it, but the general public and certainly the normal conventional health practitioners simply are totally unaware. And I know that there's a whole page of other things from hair, skin, energy, temperatures, all that, and I will continue to give my advice to clients that we have to address this because it's not coming from their normal foods, and because of soil depletions, because of no iodine, because of all this, it is just a mandatory thing. And I love the fact that which you understand all too well, and I do too, that when physicians today, conventional ones, they want the newest, the greatest, the shiniest new items which are patentable, because the patent is what allows the pharmaceutical industry to have the power to come in and educate them / brainwash them into the newest and greatest. Of course, that's profit driven most of the time. Not always. Occasionally there are some really great drugs that are being invented, but not that many, as we know. So I know on your website, and I want everyone to know this, that at drbrownstein.com, he has a great website. He has the ability to get an ebook, his ebook on iodine, why you need it and why you can't live without it. So if you want to, get that, you can do it, or you can order any of his books off of any of the sites that you can order books. Second question about a different topic. I know it kind of is the cousin to the iodine conversation, but people who are having this super low thyroid, I want to talk just a little bit about all of the ones who come in and I'm speaking to that say the same thing, which is, oh, my doctor checked it and it's fine. But the truth is their scale of the TSH scale is, to my opinion, is, far too wide. Secondly, is they're looking at TSH, which is, for people listening, the pituitary is basically telling the thyroid that it needs to pep up when you have an altered TSH number. Well, the thing is, to me, and you tell me this is just one part of the answer. I think symptoms should be another part of the evaluation. And so many women especially have lost 10 to 15 years of better quality life because they've been told they're normal. And normal's not good, is it?
Well, so the thyroid gland's a small gland, a butterfly-shaped gland in the lower part of the neck that produces thyroid hormone. And thyroid hormone is like iodine, essential for life. We either produce enough or we develop problems. When we don't produce any, we'll die. So the thyroid gland has the highest concentration of iodine in the body, and it's very sensitive to iodine status. So if iodine levels have truly fallen 50 to 60% over the last 40 to 50 years, as the government's own studies show, you can rest assured the thyroid gland is going to be affected in the vast majority of people out there. And the thyroid gland is supposed to produce thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone interacts with every cell in the body to maintain good metabolism, to produce heat, to produce energy. And the effects on the body are like what you mentioned. The number one complaint I see with people is they're fatigued, and they're tired, and that's their biggest complaint. But the thyroid can also affect hair growth. Hair loss can be a sign of low thyroid. Puffiness in general, they maintain extra fluid on their body and they gain weight and they have difficulty losing weight. They're cold, they have poor nails, dry skin, and a host of other problems that go with it. So yes, we are seeing an epidemic of thyroid problems that's being driven in part from iodine deficiency, as well as other things. I mean, the thyroid is very sensitive to a lot of pollutants in the environment, which we're continually exposed to at ever-increasing levels. And as you mentioned, the thyroid blood tests, the reference range is too wide. So it misses too many people who really are suffering from hypothyroidism, even though their physician will tell them, well, you're in the reference range. Well, I've lectured to doctors for 20 plus years on this, and we go through the reference range. I show them how the reference ranges are derived and where the problems are with the reference ranges. And even in the reference range, people can be suffering from hypothyroidism because that range is just too wide.
That's so informative because in my area, at least here in Tennessee, we don't have people like you. They seem to meander themselves to other states more than they do here. We have maybe a couple, but so it's tough for the client patient when they're told from their supposed expert that they're perfectly fine, and yet they're not. And the thing is, I like the fact that, and I tend to forget the fact that puffiness can be one of the symptoms of this. Before I move on to the next thing on the next subject, I want to ask you one last question. If you personally were feeling that you were getting sick from a pathogen, a flu, a cold, do you up the dose of your thyroid, or you just keep doing the normal amount?
Well, the taking thyroid hormone.
I meant iodine when I said that instead of thyroid. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, iodine has strong antibacterial, antiviral, antiparasitic, anti-candida properties. There's been no pathogen that's been shown to be resistant to iodine. So yes, you can take more iodine. Now, it's better to be taking iodine, have your levels up when you become ill, because you'll be less ill. It won't last as long and your body will get over it quicker. But yes, I sometimes tell people, I frequently tell people, take a little bit more iodine when they're sick and then drop their levels back down when they're feeling better.
What is the maximum dose? About 60 milligrams would be my guess, but I'm guessing. There's
no maximum dose. I have people on hundreds of milligrams.
Really?
People with cancer, the breast, the ovaries, uterus, prostate, pancreas. If they have stage 4 cancer, you have to get iodine concentrations up high enough in the body to get that. It's called an apoptotic effect, or a cancer killing effect. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that with RDA amounts of iodine. I show that when I lecture to doctors and I go through the physiology and biochemistry behind that. So there's really no maximum dose. Albert St. Georgi, the discoverer of vitamin C in the 1920s, wrote about his experience with iodine. He was taking a gram of iodine, or 1,000 milligrams a day, in the form of glucose solution. So I have many of my patients on a couple of hundred milligrams, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish with it.
I love that. And last question, do you feel that the morning temperature test is a good at-home method to kind of look at the whether it's low thyroid function or not?
Well, that's a good question. One of the reasons I wrote my books was to educate my patients so they can make better healthcare decisions. And I talk about that temperature test in my thyroid book. And it's the first morning temperature before you get out of bed. It's called a basal body temperature. And the idea behind it is the thyroid hormone is needed to raise the metabolic rate of the cells and produce heat. So people who are low thyroid are cold all the time, and they'll have a low basal body temperature. So you can use that first morning temperature while they're lying in bed. And I have the reference ranges in my book on, what's normal, what's not, and give you a guide on, hey, perhaps I have a thyroid problem. Is it a perfect test? No, it's not a perfect test, but it's a pretty good test, and it's a pretty good monitor of thyroid function.
I love that. And I did do a holistic navigator myself on my education of thyroid, and I did mention that, and certainly mention you on there. So listeners can go back to the one that I did that talks a little bit more about that. One of the last newsletter you sent out, my friend, the one 2020 January, on blood pressure is so enlightening, because as you know as well as I, that the mass amount of misinformation that is being funneled to the public in order to sell more drugs is sad. It angers me. I'm sure it does you at times. And there's a time and place for the right drugs. There's no doubt. And we have people who need to be on, strong medication for blood pressure. But the thing is, how you talked about in this newsletter, which makes such common sense, and I've talked about many of the things you've said for years, is you cannot expect a 60-year-old to have the same blood pressure as a 20. And the only way you're going to get the 60-year-old to probably have it is to super medicate. And then you've got a whole new list of potential problems that patient's not being told when they walk out of that office and go to the drugstore to get those drugs. And so I love the fact, and you clarify this, you're saying that in your practice that you're advising people to do a 90 plus their age for the systolic. The systolics is the higher number, diastolic's the lower number. And so if I'm 63, which I am, so it would be 90 plus 63. 153 would be my limit for the top. Is that what you're saying?
So blood pressure certainly can be a problem. If it's too high, it can cause kidney problems and strokes and heart attacks, and can really, be detrimental and, can cause death if it gets up high enough. So it should be taken seriously. The problem is the conventional powers that be have arbitrarily or semi-arbitrarily, put a normal blood pressure as anything, less than 120/80. And in my writings and in my research, I make it clear that, less than 120/80 is fine if you're young, and 20 years old or so. But as we get older, for the vast majority of us, less than 120/80 is not going to perfuse the brain well enough. The body has to pump blood from the head to the toes 24/7. And when we're young, there's a lot of elasticity and a lot of collagen in our arteries and veins, and it can move blood very nicely and easily through the body. That we lose some of that elasticity as we get older, just a consequence of aging. And so the body needs a higher blood pressure generally as we get older to pump blood, head to toe. And, for older people, many of them, lower blood pressure is sometimes not a great thing. So that's why there's so many side effects with blood pressure pills, because they can cause people to be dizzy and they'll fall, break a hip, or, hit their head or something, or they give them brain fog and they can't think clearly. I just went through this with a patient yesterday in the office who, he's in his mid-70s and his blood pressure was 110/60. He's complaining of dizziness. And I said to him, look, I think, you're over-medicated right now. I think we need to, lower your medication now, let your blood pressure come up a little bit. And now there are some older people that have low blood pressure their whole life. They're in the minority. So really the only way to maintain those recommendations, less than 120/80 in your older years, is by drugs. So pharmaceutical companies set up a great guideline. The guideline is blood pressure should be less than 120/80 forever. And that's just not going to happen in people 50 years and up. So they're all going to need medication for their blood pressure. And, that's why we're over-medicating people. And, the mortality from blood pressure and the big problems occur when the systolic pressure is above 188. And in that newsletter that you're talking about, I wrote one of the reasons we're having so many blood pressure problems is people aren't drinking enough water and they're dehydrated. And if they don't have enough blood volume, which water helps to maintain, the body's going to have to tighten up blood pressure and raise it to pump a smaller volume of blood from head to toe. So in that newsletter, I talk about some natural things you can do to keep blood pressure down. But I also talk about, don't get so worried if you don't follow in those guidelines and you're not 20 years old.
Yeah, that's great advice because, and all well too well that the conventional health professionals use fear as a motivating factor so well. And the patient is just like, he or she can't even think for themselves because they've been like, you're walking time bomb, we've got to get this under control immediately. And, I separate the world into two different classes of people. And I say this often on the Holistic Navigator is into these two groups, learners and non-learners. Today's times, if you are a non-learner and you're not willing to embrace the conversations that need to be looked at as far as your health and your future, you're doomed. You're basically doomed if you are going for the traditional advice. You will be the average Tennessean where we are is on 17 prescription drugs per year. And I'm sure it varies across the country, but we know that is their only thing in their toolbox. And it's very, very frustrating and sad. And they're told not to say much about anything holistic. You are from the other world. You are highly trained. You have experience in seeing the power of using foods from the earth, using supplements, using less drugs. And I know on the newsletter for blood pressure, you also talked about using salt, which is, demonized in this country as being a terribly unhealthy food. It's not if it's the right one, using the right dose. And you are so right. The amount of people I've seen that have had low blood pressure, their quality of life is generally not as good as it would be if they were more in the good range. But that is, I want to encourage people who are listening to sign up for your newsletter, Dr. Brownstein. It is probably the most informative of any, and I've got them all. I mean, everything from the early Whitakers to the life extensions to you name it. I scour the landscape because I want to know things so I can share things on not only the Holistic Navigator, but on my private personal consultations. And so people who want to subscribe, they just go to drbrownstein.com. Is that how they do it?
Yes, they can. There's a link to it from my website. They can also go to newsmax.com and just type in my name.
Absolutely. And we will also have a link for them to find it very efficiently too, because I'm got to an age now where it's, I want to accumulate partners in this next journey of my life in this field of health, holistic, and nutrition. And then you're going to be one of those partners, which you have been, but you didn't know it. And I think, many of us are under the gun. We are swimming upstream, especially in this part of the country, as, a kook, a voodoo, all the things that conventional people want to, put us down for. And I just think you are a true hero. I think you're a gladiator who has the guts to stand up and say what you believe. And it's not from a profit motivation because you're not, you're selling, you have 10 books. People should have all 10, and you do sell some other things, but it's obvious to me you're selling truth. And it's free almost if you just want to read some of your things. And even your newsletter is so reasonable that it's just worth every stinking penny. So I'm encouraging everyone to, if you only can pick one newsletter to learn about holistic health, I want you to pick Dr. Brownstein's because I know you will be very pleased with that.
Thank you so much. And I actually pulled it up on my computer. It's called Natural Way to Health, Dr. Brownstein's Natural Way to Health.
There you go.
Look, I only write about what works and what doesn't work in my practice. And I'm on the front line. I'm seeing patients, full-time practice, and I enjoy it. And, I study what I do, and I can write about what works and doesn't work. And, there's no punches pulled there, what I write.
Yeah, I can attest to that. It's very obvious. And again, I thank you so much. I hope we can do this again in maybe a few months and cover 3 other subjects. But I appreciate it, Dr. Brownstein, and I hope someday to see you again. If you're ever in this part of the country, I'd love to have a meeting or have you give a lecture or anything else. But you enjoy 2020. We will hopefully be back with you again. And again, thank you from my deepest, deepest heart for spending your time to educate everyone over this last 40 minutes. So we hopefully talk to you in a few months, okay?
Well, thank you for having me, and let's do it again.
And that was such an amazing interview with Dr. Brownstein. It just so reconfirms the truth about the subjects of iodine, thyroid, and blood pressure. And there's one thing when you listen or you hear people who are well-read or educated, and I value that. But the person on the front line is the person who is seeing clients and patients every single day and has the academic background or the experience, plus they have the ability to put together and connect the dots of, okay, I did this and it did work. I did this and it didn't work. And they start, fine-tuning this path of advice and health and education for individuals who need it. And we need to have a team approach, which I've spoke endlessly about. Do not expect your normal, conventional physician to be the full team. They're there for acute care medicine. What is that? That is, you have strep throat, you have a sprained ankle, you have a tick bite, you have something else going on. They're wonderful, wonderful. They're not trained in chronic disease or truly prevention of disease. They're simply not. And so we need to combine our forces, and we're going to use people like your conventional people and others similar to Dr. Brownstein and maybe some local people who are very, very well trained and experienced. So all of you, the best to your year of health. We are going to help you optimize it. And so stay tuned for an episode after episode. We got some exciting ones coming up. Have a blessed and fiercely happy and healthy day. Thank you.
The information on this podcast and the topics discussed have not been evaluated by the FDA or anyone of the medical profession and is not aimed to replace any advice you may receive from your medical practitioner. The Holistic Navigator assumes no responsibility or liability whatsoever on the behalf of any purchaser or reader of these materials. The Holistic Navigator is not a doctor, nor does he claim to be. Please consult your physician before beginning any health regimen.